So this is a Reverend Billy Corgan signature model that came in from one of our regular clients. He plays a ton. I've seen more wear on his guitars in the last couple years than many others that are decades and decades old. So we've already modified this for a Blade Runner tremolo because to him it was the perfect guitar. It just needed a trem. So we got that on there about a year ago. Now it's in for some much needed TLC. So the frets have pretty substantial divots in them. Down here, it's mostly from like open chords and stuff like that. And then as you get up toward the end of the fingerboard, there's huge flat spots, usually caused by bends over time. Any sort of divot is going to create potential for buzzing, and those flat spots can create really tricky intonation problems that most people wouldn't notice or know how to rectify. And the solution to that is fretwork. So what we're going to do is level all the frets so that they're flat on top and true, and all these divots are ground out. Then we're going to recrown them, round them over, and then polish them so that they're nice and smooth. Another issue that develops from just serious wear and tear is that the nut slots will get ground down over time from the strings rubbing on them, so they get lower and lower gradually, and that can also introduce buzzing around the first fret and playing open strings. So in the past, what we've done on this one is we've actually shimmed the entire nut with a piece of hardwood. He's played through that added height, and we've repeatedly shimmed these two nut slots with a composite NCA glue to just build those guys up, but it's gotten to the point where we've got to replace the whole thing. So we have a brand new Tusk XL blank from Graphtec that we're going to fit into a new nut. So if you're ever wondering why a new nut costs money, it's a lot of time and labor, but that's going to be on there, and it should be good as new in a couple days. And I don't know what else to say. So one thing that's really important to consider when you're doing a fret level is the position of the neck before you start. So ideally you want it to be as straight as possible. Not uncommon to have necks that don't want to be perfectly straight when you adjust them due to having constant tension on it from the strings and fluctuations in temperature and humidity. It is a piece of wood and it's going to shift the way it wants to shift. So what we do is try to get it as straight as we can using a slotted level like this so that we are ignoring the frets and just looking at the fingerboard, because the frets are going to be true to each other whether or not the neck's straight, but how the neck is positioned before we do it determines how it'll react to appropriate relief when the strings are on. This guy has a couple little funky spots. Playing with the truss rod adjustment and finding that happy medium and taking that into account will tell me what I need to do and what I need to potentially compensate for when I'm leveling. So I do notice that no matter how I adjust it, there is a spot that is hitting right down here. It's pretty common for companies that manufacture guitars and technicians to level in some fall off at the end of the board, which is just a gradual reduction in height the last, maybe 5 to 10 frets. So we're definitely going to be doing that on this one, and that allows just a little extra clearance at the end of the fingerboard so that when you're fretting up toward the 12th and above that, especially with any potential humps around the neck joint, which is pretty common, you're not going to get a bunch of rattling or fretting out here. Okay, so we got the neck adjusted to where we wanted it as far as getting it as straight as possible. Got it all taped off to protect the fingerboard. We've gone over with a Sharpie and marked each fret just so we can have an easier time telling where we're taking off material as we go over it with a leveling beam. Double check the radius with these radius gauges. I find oftentimes whatever the advertised radius is for a neck specification, there's a lot of variance just because every piece is, no matter how it's built, there's an element of hand finishing involved, and they're not all going to be 1000% perfect. So this one is advertised as having a 12-inch radius. Upon measuring it, we found it's closer to 14 inches. So I'm going to keep that in mind when I'm going over the board so that there's not a weird discrepancy between the fret radius and the fingerboard radius. And then we've got some fresh sandpaper on this leveling beam. We've got 320 on one side just to get the bulk of the material off, and then 600 on the other side to help make polishing a little bit easier. And now we're just going to go for it. So immediately you can see where the divots are where the pen's left marks behind. So we need to get to the point where those are eliminated so there's no longer any low spots. So that's going to be the first thing that we want to tackle. And as we eliminate them on this first fret here, we're going to work downward so that we don't continue to lower the first fret after it's already been planed, because we don't want the first fret to end up lower than the ones after it. Otherwise, it's going to be buzzy there. Okay, so we got the nut shaped pretty much how we want it. We've taken the sides down. We've got the height about where we want it. We may have to take a little bit more off the top after we cut the slots, but what I've done is